right, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yes, okay. So thank you very much for joining this tutorial. My name is Pedro Ramonetti. I'm joined today also by Katie O'Laughlin. We're both from the National Data Platform team. In this 1 hour tutorial, what we're gonna do is that we're going to cover some of the main features of the National Data Platform. What is the National Data Platform? What is the end goal of this platform? What is the community that is serving? And most importantly, how do you work with the National Data Platform? How do you discover data, work with the data, connect the data to the computing? And then we're going to show you how can you leverage its features for your educational use cases. So please feel free to ask questions at any point. And with that said, I'm going to pass it to Katie.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, Pedro did a brief agenda, and so I'm just going to give an overview of NDP and its features and functions. And so NDP was created because we found that working with big data, especially in education and research settings, was really troublesome from fragmented data access, disconnected between producing data and sharing it with people, how to customize things for your data sets, being able to scale. A lot of people didn't have access to computing resources or purely ways to make their data accessible, and sharing data via email is not the most efficient and great way to share your data. Also, a lot of experiences were very terminal based to share data or provide data access. So we wanted to build something that was very user friendly. And basically just try to take really complex formats and make them into a very simple UI. We're trying to bridge that gap. So we made the National Data Platform. It's been around for 3 years now. And we're trying to tackle the challenges of using and sharing data and being able to efficiently compute with them with the help of NRP. So we have a broad, federated, extensible data ecosystem that basically allows you to discover data, models, services, and tools in our data catalog, be able to package them in our workspaces to say this is the code, these are the data and services that I'm using, be able to collaborate with your students and researchers, and be able to bring that packaged set of tools into a computing environment where you can build, produce, and make things reproducible. So this is kind of an overview of all the different elements. So we like to have fair data and use at scale. So we have implemented the DCAT schema for our metadata. We have a vast data registration form to provide ample metadata for users. A lot of users don't know the importance or the way to format metadata, and so we built very user-friendly forms and UI to be able to encourage the sharing of metadata for both discoverability and governance. So we have collaborative workspaces and custom services to use. So a lot of our classrooms and demos, folks can just log into our site, take one of these workspaces back to their My Hub, and be able to run the code easily with the access to the data already embedded. We have cyber infrastructure and cloud resources with NRP, so we're seamlessly integrated both authentication and also NDP resources into Jupyter Hub on NRP pods. That's been a huge help for researchers and professors because getting compute is always a hassle. And so if we come to them and say that we can give you data access and also provide free compute, it's a double whammy of a great day for all of them. We have integrated with classrooms and data challenges. We've been really successful with data challenges lately. Data challenges are like hackathons, and so basically you're able to build out a whole workflow to allow students to be able to tackle problems and be able to produce outputs and then have them judged all within our website. So I'm going to go over just some features of NDP. So I like to start out with the user profile because everything in NDP is created by a person, and we want to be able to preserve the credit and provenance and governance of what's being created and published in NDP. And so we've built out user profiles or features for people to build out. And so if you find a classroom that you like, you can click on the professor's name and be able to learn more about where they are, their expertise, and their roles. So we have digital assets. So in our catalog, we have a bunch of metadata. I will clarify that NDP does not store data. We are the catalog for all of your metadata. We have storing, like partnering with NRP, we can help folks store their data and provide that expertise, but NDP natively does not store data. But once you've registered your digital asset into our catalog, we have advanced searching abilities to be able to find exactly what you need. And then we've provided this metadata on really accessible UI. So we have both geospatial and temporal data, and also, I guess, non-geospatial temporal data. And next we have a map search. And so if you want to find something in Southern California at this time for LiDAR, you can be able to search across all of the metadata to find exactly what you would need. So workspaces are kind of the essential component to NDP and how folks do work and collaborate. So I like to use the metaphor that the workspace is like a recipe. So if you've come to NDP, you have something you want to do an analysis. A workspace is like the recipe to get it done. So this is where you store all of your data, you store all of your Git repos, you build out instructions, and this can be just for you. This can be shared with your researchers, or this also can be built out into classrooms for assignments for students. So this is really small, but this is an example of a workspace. And so you can build out descriptions, instructions, and then at the bottom you can see that there's catalog, assets, and code bases. And then, so that basically describes to anyone that this is the data set that I used. This is the code base that I use, and then you can add any additional resources for more information. And then we have open workspaces. And so if you would go to NDP and click on the Education Hub Explore page, you'll be able to see these public workspaces that are demos. We have agents up there. We have Iron Horse Vineyard did a really cool data access and also education workflow. So yeah, we want to be able to share people's analysis. Yeah. So I would say in a fully robust way for versioning and that control over the data, we don't. So we have a policy that whatever you do to your data is your responsibility. So we do not provide data access or are responsible for what happens on the data side. But on the metadata side, you can do updates to your metadata and you can add new versions to it. But we are hoping that in the future that we're going to be building out a more robust versioning and control over, I guess, the data side to prevent that. Yeah, sure.
My main concern is about the users of the data. How do they know that they have reliable data and up-to-date data? Is there some kind of marking there or some indication when was the data verified, etc.? Do you understand my question?
Yeah. So we do not do verification. We do an approval process. So when someone registers data, before it gets put into our catalog, that we have an internal team that does basically a review of the metadata and validates that the data, access points are there. We don't have the expertise to say this is bad data or good data. And so we basically are doing a validation check for proper metadata filling out. And so that would be on the user's responsibility to be able to validate that. We do provide the user that registered the data set, and then again, they'll have their profile. And so if folks have questions, there'll be a point of contact that they could call or they could email or reach out to ask those questions for validity. Yeah.
So you don't have the review capability that people need to take use if they have used that.
If they've used it?
Yeah, you can also need reviews, this one good data or not.
Mm.
So you don't have to review data yell.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that's funny. Okay, so we've actually thought a lot about that and being able to have comments or the review of the community. And so it's good to hear that that would be helpful. So we do not currently have that, but that's definitely something we've been talking about. Yeah.
In systems like bioarchive or something, they have this thing that you have to make sure that tell them what are the machines that you use for sequencing the DNA or something. In those cases, do you have some specific guidelines for the user or the who is storing the data that you have to mention the device that you are using to this or the parameters that you use to generate this data or something like that, so that whoever is going to use this data set, they know what they are doing for.
Yeah, so we use the DCAT schema, which is really similar to schema.org for our metadata. It's a general metadata standard. And so that seems like a very, maybe not niche, but specific metadata requirement. And so at the moment, we are not building out those metadata forms for those specific niches. But we are building out, so we're doing a data registration 2.0 right now. And so we're building out the ability for users to be able to expand on that metadata standard and add those niche metadata fields that are particular for your data set that might not be in every single metadata. Yeah. Cool. Question? Okay. Okay, so then, so what you've done with your workspaces, you've gone to the catalog, you found your data sets, you found your services that you want to use. You say, this is my GitHub repo that I want to use. And thanks to NRP, we've been able to integrate NDP through a Jupyter Hub widget into the NRP ecosystem. And so when you hop over to NRP, you can choose what workspace or collaboration that you're working on. And then you can, grab all the resources that you need, select any images, and then be able to launch your pod. Then once you are logged in and your pod is running, we have this, we have this side extension in which you can select your workspaces. It then grabs all the Git repos that you've added to that workspace and the data sets that have been there or been attached as well. And then you're able to directly download those data access links into your directory. And so if folks don't know how to download raster files or whatever, it's able to do that for them. That was a big user-friendly leap that happened because folks, didn't always know how to grab the data if it's huge. And then we also have an integration with Pelican. So like we said before, we do not store data, but we have partnerships with NRP and then also Pelican. Pelican is an OSDF storage. And so you can be able to add your credentials and be able to interact with Pelican from our UI. We also know that everyone likes Jupyter Hub, but they also have IDE preferences. And so we have added RStudio and VS Code into our Jupyter Hub image. And so folks can use those as well in NRP. Okay, so I've talked a lot about collaborations. And so in NDP, we call them studios. So studios are a dedicated space for collaboration. So if you are a researcher and you've been emailing with another researcher, I don't know, across the state, instead of emailing them your data set or saying, I did a fix over here, you go over here, we have built out, this is a picture of a project. We have projects, we have data challenges, and we have classrooms. And basically, you're able to add people to your project and then be able to work on your workspaces together. So if someone finds a cool data set, they can add that to their workspace and everyone will be able to see it. And same with code and other things. And then the really cool thing that we have implemented with NRP is that when you go to launch your pod, within your group, you have a shared PVC. And so if someone, if we are downloading a giant data set, you only have to do it once. And then it's in that shared directory and everyone can use it. Yeah.
Ilkay framed this beautifully in her talk at Scenic in March. Can you just explain to the audience the implications of that for a classroom and what we face about how we have to dumb down our examples when we're training people and we can't give them real data?
Did you have a comment?
And related to that, at Cal State Fulton, we've been trying to do exactly this in the NRP environment. Michael and Nicholas here have been working on it for like the whole semester and figuring out how do we do group projects for faculty. So it's exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, okay, so basically a shared PVC is, it's a folder within NRP that once you launch a pod, that directory will show up for everyone. So if I'm in a group with Pedro, we will launch our projects individually on our own pods, but then we'll be able to interact with that storage together. I would say a lot of us know how to use Git, maybe not students know how to use Git efficiently, and merge conflicts happen and everything. But so this kind of takes away all of that chaos and people are able to change notebooks and people will see updates, and it's basically that shared storage that people have direct access to every time they launch that project. I'm glad that's really useful. I'm often hidden behind the client stuff, so it's good to hear that you guys that's a good feature. Yeah. Oh yeah, so this is a project example. Pedro's gonna go through some data challenge and classroom examples that'll be very specific to education. And I'm gonna pass it over to Pedro.
Questions? All right, thank you very much for that intro, Katie. So now I'm going to review some of the educational use cases that we have for NDP. As Katie mentioned, in NDP for collaboration, we have this concept of studios. So for education, we have two types of education studios, data challenges and classroom. They are both very similar from the educator side. They are built quite the same way. It's just that one is designed to be an open challenge for most, or if not all of the NDP users, to be discoverable for the community. And the other use case, it's a private entity in which the professor has control on who joins that classroom, has control over the groups that are part of that classroom, and the educational space is not exposed to everyone. Another goal of the classroom is also to be able to create curriculum that can be eventually reused by other educators. And we're going to show a couple of examples of that we have accessible right now on NDP. So the first thing that you must know is what is the process that you have to follow before creating an educational space. Number one, you need to request educator credentials. The educational spaces are restricted spaces that can only be created by the users who are granted these credentials. And at this point, those credentials are granted by request. We talk with you, we explore your use case, we see how we can adapt your course or your challenge to NDP. And after finding out the path, we're able to provide you with those credentials. And we, most importantly, first invite you to explore some of the examples that we have so you are sure that NDP fits your needs and it's the right platform for your use case. The other thing is to prepare the workspaces that we also call modules in the context of education. Think about the path and all the different pieces that your course or data challenge needs and build those ahead of publishing the classroom or the data challenge with your students. And the process of creating a workspace involves, number one, it could involve registering a data set, especially if the data that you're going to use for your course, it's research data that can be leveraged by the rest of the community of NDP. We highly encourage you to go through the data registration process, and we can also support you with that. Then to prepare all the Jupyter notebooks that your course or data challenge needs, and very, very importantly, validate their execution on our Jupyter Hub. One of the NRP hosted Jupyter Hub. One of the most common questions that we get sometimes ahead of a data challenge or ahead of working with a data set is how much resources should I reserve? Because in this UI that Katie showed, we have the option to reserve different types of resources. You can reserve GPUs, multiple cores, multiple gigabytes of RAM, different types of GPUs. And so people will always have questions that, what should I reserve for this data set? We don't have the answer. Like each data set has its own needs, has its own dependencies. So as an educator, you are responsible for validating the execution of your notebooks and how much resources your data needs, and to communicate that information to your students via the workspace. Okay, so I'm going to show you first a short video on how a student that already has an account on NDP discovers and joins a data challenge. So I'm going to play this, and I'm actually going to slow it down a little bit because it's very short. Let me put it on 0.25. So the first thing will be, once you are inside of the platform, to go to this left panel and click on Education Hub and click on the Site Explore. And the Explore section will show us all the different community resources that are available. The data challenges, the public workspaces, public projects that you can see from the community that has built a project and wants to share their outputs, their results with the rest of the community can also be discovered there. And the classrooms that I'm going to cover in a little bit. So let's say that I find a challenge that I'm interested in, for example, the example data challenge that I will show in a little bit. So the data challenge will come with all the information that the participant needs to know, the background that led to the challenge, what is the actual challenge description, how to work with it, all the materials, the rules, everything that it's, all the relevant information about the challenge, the eligibility, and most importantly, the modules. So when we build a data challenge, we encourage people to build challenges that require some sort of training for the students. And so what we have done is that for each of our data challenges, we have prepared several workspaces, each of them connecting to a different data set and providing different notebooks, so the participants get the right training prior to jumping into the challenge. So the participant can review those materials in advance prior to joining the challenge. Also, the educator also has the ability to add more workspaces once the challenge is published. Let's say that you are running a challenge on sprints, and so you first want to give your students or your participants one notebook. You can release it, and eventually you want to provide them with an additional data source, or you want to provide them with an additional task on a second sprint, you can add them eventually after the challenge is published, and the students can always come back and review that material. So I'm going to show that to you right from the platform. So right now I'm inside of the National Data Platform. And so if I click on the data challenge section, you will see that currently we have this example data challenge that it's based on an actual data challenge that we ran last year with all the information that you saw in the video. You'll see the rules, the frequently asked questions, the details of the data sets that are part of this challenge, all the materials that we gave to the students. And we also added for this example data challenge, we also added the sample solutions of the winning team and the 2 honorable mentions. So you can review those here. And as Katie mentioned, when you open a workspace, you will see in the workspace the description of that. You will see the instructions on how to launch it on the Jupyter Hub. You will see the catalog entries of the data that the workspace is using. And you will see the GitHub repository that has the notebooks that the students are supposed to work with. It also has these features. Some workspaces will come with additional resources. And this is a section where the professor can add URLs to relevant sites like documentation sites or websites that are relevant for the workspace that the student is working with. Okay. And so after reviewing let me go back one slide. Doesn't want to come back, doesn't want to return. Let me go out. Why it is not responding? Okay, the slide doesn't want to cooperate. But okay, if I'm a student and if I see a data challenge and I'm interested in joining that data challenge, then I can click on this button. Here's where I can create a team, assign a team name, add the emails of my teammates that have to be previously registered on NDP. Only one person needs to do this. They don't need like every single team member to click on this button. And so after creating that team, all the materials that I previously shown will be unblocked to them, and they will get access to launch the workspaces on the Jupyter Hub, and they will also get the shared folder that Katie mentioned. Okay? So this is how a data challenge looks like. As an educator, how do you create a data challenge? Well, there is this section called My Hub, in which you have the ability to create workspaces and the Collab Studio. So after you have your credentials to be an educator, you will get to see these 2 educational studios as part of your privileges. And so here, if I click on create an NDP data challenge, it will start by asking me a title for my challenge, the institution that is hosting the challenge, the contact information, what is the timeline for the challenge. And after setting up the challenge with the minimum required information, I will get the rest of the form to start adding all the other information that I show you. The rules, the frequently asked questions, the overview, the description, and all the workspaces that I previously created that should be also part of my hub. Like over here, like all of these workspaces that you're seeing here are workspaces that I have created and I have added to different Collab studios, different classrooms, projects, etc. Okay. Any questions so far? For sure. Yeah. I'm clicking, but I don't know why it's not. Okay, cool. So that was the data challenge use case. And then we have the classroom use case. In classroom, I will say that from the creation or preparation perspective, it's the same. But as I mentioned, the main difference is that classroom, it's a private entity that you don't get to see unless you make it public explicitly or unless that you are added to a classroom by a professor. Okay, as a student, you can go to NDP, go to the data challenges section, discover a data challenge, and join it. Like similarly, as you will do, let's say, in a platform like Kaggle. A classroom, you won't see it unless a professor adds you to it. And so here I'm going to show you a short video on how this is done. So let me also slow it down a little bit and play it. So I'm a professor. I select create a new Collab Studio. I click on NDP Classroom. I assign a title to my class. whatever name I want, the code to my class, the semester or quarter. In this case, I said winter, year, the institution. In this case, I was I was creating this classroom for the NAIR conference last in March. And then I have the control over the groups that are part of that classroom. We envision classrooms and data challenges to be spaces for collaboration and to be spaces in which students will work in teams. And so we encourage people to add students as groups. Here I'm adding the first group, group 1, and I'm adding student 1, student 2. And after I do that, I can also add all the different modules or workspaces that I prepare for it. I can, for example, there I'm saying, okay, this is your project A. I had previously put all the material together in that project A workspace. I set up a due date, and then I can add it, and the people will be able to see those workspaces and launch them on the Jupyter Hub. And after I create it, from the professor side, I can always come back. I can publish it, and I can always come back and add new material to it, or I can just delete it if I'm not satisfied with the result. And as a student, you will see the same material in the classroom section, but you won't get any privileges to edit the content of it. Okay. So right now, I'm going to show you a couple of examples that we have on our public classroom section. As I mentioned, the idea of having these classrooms is for it's not in my hub, on the Explore Division Hub section. We have these two examples that we prepared for this tutorial, the Agentic AI classroom, which comes with three different workspaces. All of these workspaces are connecting to the NRP's LLM service and have detailed instructions on how to be run on the Jupyter Hub. And so the first video that I'm going to show you is an example on how to use one of those. So imagine that I'm a student and I can see now the 7NRP Agentic AI classroom. I can open those. I can open one of the workspaces. Like in this case, I'm opening the California Landscape Metrics AI Agent workspace. I'll also slow it down a little bit. Yeah. Okay. And so I can review the instructions that the instructor sets for me. Then I will select to run on the NSF Jupyter Hub service. I wait for the page to load. I can either select only the single workspace, or I can select to run the full classroom. And the main difference is that when I select the full classroom, I can get the shared folder mounted on my Jupyter Hub server. If I just select to work on the workspace, I will not get the shared folder because it will mean that I'm trying to work individually on that workspace. And something that is also worth mentioning is that additional to the shared storage that we provide, the shared PVC, every single user of NDP also gets a personal storage folder when they launch a server on Jupyter Hub. Even if you are not part of any collaboration studio, every time that you launch a server, you have one folder in which you can store all your work, all your personal work, okay? And something that is also important mentioning for those who are not familiar with Kubernetes is that if you start a session in Jupyter Hub and you don't store your work in any of those folders, in the personal folder or any shared folder, your work is lost after your server shuts down. The environments and the files are not persistent across sessions on Jupyter Hub. Only the files that are stored in any of those folders are persistent across sessions. Okay? And so, sorry, let me go one back. Nope. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, so I was here in the, okay. So let me go a little bit back. So I was in the section of reserving resources. The specific workspace that I'm reviewing doesn't have any special requirements. I can keep the default. But something that tells me to do, and this is another important piece, is that it tells me that to launch this workspace, I need to use this image. When you launch a Jupyter Hub server in our NRP hosted Jupyter Hub, what you get, it's a vanilla Python 3.11 server. That comes with the default Python libraries, and so it is ready for you to install your own dependencies, pandas, numpy, whatever your notebook needs. But sometimes some notebooks or some data sets need some very, very specific requirements, especially like system dependencies that are not installable from the default Jupyter Hub server. So we allow you to bring customized Jupyter-based images with the dependencies that your data needs. And if you don't know how to do this, we have documentation for it, or we can also provide support. In this case, this example that I'm showing is an example of one workspace that needs you to add that image in advance when you request your server. So it comes with the needed dependencies for your notebook to be run. Okay. Oh. I keep making the mistakes of touching the space bar. Okay. So after I pasted the image and make the reservation according to the instructions, I can start my server. I need to wait for NRP to assign me a node, assign my server to a node. And something that I want to mention is that this video is a little accelerated. It will typically take between 2 or 3 minutes to get your server to start running. But for the purposes of the tutorial, we rushed the video. Yeah, sure.
Is there any limit to the number of students in a class? Will that impact if there are 50 students versus 500? Is that going to slow down? And also, what is the typical wait time for these resources to be allocated? And how do we guarantee of sorts to make sure that all of our classroom gets allocated the same type of resources and also are scalable?
So these are resources by request. You get an allocation based on the available resources on the cluster on NRP, and there is a page to see how many resources are available. Naturally, the more resources that you request or the more complex GPU requests that you have, it will be harder to get an allocation. And if you have, for example, like you mentioned, a class of 50 students and you need to have some nodes reserved for a specific time frame, we can explore that with the NRP folks, and we will need to talk with either Mahi or Mohamed over here to get that request settled for your class or your data challenge.
Nice to see you, Sarvani. One way to get around that is to buy to invest in NRP. My question is maybe similar, and maybe others have this question too. So we operate our own Jupyter Hub service on NRP. Are the NDP data sets that are exposed, are those exposed through like stable programmable things, or do we need to run on your platform?
No, you can provide your in situ resources, or also if you have, for example, cloud bank credits and you want to host your own computing and you want to have your own Jupyter Hub set up using your cloud bank credits or your AWS cloud credits, we can provide assistance for that. We actually have done that, and that will actually give you more access control on who can access that compute, because we can create groups that restrict the access to those Jupyter Hubs only to the people that are part of those groups. Like you can create a classroom or a data challenge, and once you have your list of users, we can add that to our login system, our identity system, Keycloak. And so via those groups, we can restrict who can actually launch pods in those Jupyter Hub. And then you can also have more control on how much resources they can reserve. For example, for a data challenge that one of our partners hosted from the University of Missouri, we limited the amount of memory and the amount of cores that the students could reserve, and we didn't grant them access to launch any GPU because the data that they were going to work with didn't need any of those. So yeah, we can definitely give you the ability to use your in situ resources or your own credits, and also to restrict the access on who you want those Jupyter hubs to be exposed to.
And to talk about the data part of your question, so our catalog is public. You don't need to log in to have access to it. And we expose all the URLs that are in the metadata. So if you do want to use your own compute or bring it locally, all of that is exposed. And so you can just copy and paste it into your notebooks. Yeah.
Sorry. Does the system, if you have a big classroom, also provide some caching of data, for example? Caching.
What type of data do you have in this databases that you're talking about? Can we see some examples? Does it have pictures, audio, or what type of data do you have in there?
In the specific classroom, so we have different types of data. For example, on the data challenge example that we have here. So this challenge, it's a replica of an actual challenge that we hosted last year, and the goal for this challenge was to be able to predict tree metrics from ALS generated tree list. So to get to that point with the participants, we gave them access to multiple data sources. So first, we exposed them to a tree inventory collected by the FIA, the United States Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service. And we also exposed them to some field collected data by the UC team. We also exposed them on this other module. We exposed them to a collection of aerial laser LiDAR scan and terrestrial LiDAR scan that we have collected on the field. And well, the aerial LiDAR scans from the USGS. We also exposed them to artificial data generated by tree models, and also we expose them to tree map. So we have also some modules in other data challenges. We have give them an access to satellite data, imagery from NAPE. We have pretty much every research-based data we can give access to. But as Katie mentioned at the beginning, we don't host the data. We are not a data repository. We are a place where you can catalog your metadata and you can make the data accessible to the users. And when you register an asset in the catalog, you are responsible for providing all the relevant, either the URLs that connect you to directly download the file, like I'm doing here, or in some cases to provide the URLs to the sites where you can request the API keys, or you can request the credentials to access the data set, depending on where the data is hosted, depending on what kind of access control the data has.
And I also say that we're trying to encourage folks when they upload their data to also add a notebook that's exposed to show the user how to download and interact with the data. That's been really helpful for our data challenges and other things. When you get a URL, if you're very technical and skilled, then you can download it. But it's really helpful to have an example notebook of how to access that data. And then getting back to your caching question. So NDP natively does not cache things for you, but with our partnership with Pelican, they have caching mechanisms for storage. And so if you fetch that data set, it will cache it at the, I guess, most local origin to you. And it'll be there for X amount of days. And then that will be a lot quicker for data retrieval. So that is the caching mechanism that we have access to, but not natively to NDP. Yes.
They used to have a comment section. Do you have a comment section? And then I could post that, okay, I think there's something wrong with the data.
Yeah. I think someone else talked about comments in having a more like forum-like interaction on data sets to say this was great for usage and blah, blah, blah. Or this didn't have data between like these different time zones or something. So yeah, I think that that's something we've talked about bringing into it. I think the moderation of a forum is a big task. So that's something that we would need to handle in a policy way. But it's a really good suggestion. We've heard it twice. So that seems like users would like it.
So right now on the NRP that we for namespaces that we use for classrooms, we're able to configure and control the environment for students. And I know you said to work, that's something that you can help and support. On the back end, this is pulling from NRP compute resources, correct? So if we were to create the classroom hub, do we have, how much control do we have over like the configuration side of things in terms of the YAML file, like compared to NRP?
So natively at the current moment, you would have to provide all the instruction on how a student would configure their pod. So it would not have any unique configuration. We're looking into figuring out how professors and researchers can, I guess, default this form, the form that was there, because a lot of non-technical or students, they're like, I don't know what RAM is, I don't know how much I need. So we're currently building out that feature to be able to provide those recommendations. But at the configuration level is, I think, another leap. But with the recommendations, we would also provide the image. So Pedro's done a really good job of adding all those instructions of you don't need a GPU, you need 16 gigs. But that's all because Pedro's very good at his job. But we want to be able to build in features that will do that defaulting for students so they don't, one, they don't feel overwhelmed, and two, they get what they need and not way too much or way too little.
Any other question?
We have a Jupyter Hub that we use for our data science curricula. And some of the value adds for us are what I mentioned before, availability and scalability for different classrooms and structures, and different support for different images, and support for building those images, and integration with LMS. Is that something that, I haven't heard that here, but is that something that you're thinking about working on? The other pieces too is auto grading, like with Gradescope integrations and all that. Do you have that?
So we don't have a native integration yet. We have definitely heard that need from the community with a learning management system like Canvas or Gradescope. What we have, for example, in the other public classroom that I was going to show, these for this one, for example, we prepare a customized image that integrates AutoGrader, and AutoGrader is passed to the students in the notebooks. What we haven't figured out is how to support that in a user-friendly way for the professor, because AutoGrader needs the professor to know how to run Docker containers for the grading. So that's something that we're exploring. It's not something that we have 100% solved, but we are looking for ways on how to integrate.
The Jupyter project has an NB grader that's part of the Jupyter environment. So you could just pick that up and put it in there. It should work.
Yeah, that's another tool that we have explored. It's just that we haven't made a decision of what is like the more generalizable use case for the users, and how to build a system that it's like suitable for most of the use cases. All right, so I will continue. We have 10 minutes left, so we'll continue showing you this quick example. We're gonna get back to the case in which I already have the Jupyter Hub server running. This is an example in which I'm coming back to a previous work. So here I have the two folders that I mentioned The first one that starts with user is your user folder. Every single user of NDP gets that storage by default. And then when you're added to a project, you get the group folder mounted into your server. So in this case, our group was called prep because we were preparing something. And so in that example, I have nothing. So I'm going to select the workspace I want to work on. In that case, given the image that I previously pasted on the reservation resources UI, I'm going to select the California Landscape Metrics AI Agent workspace. So I will select it. I will clone the repository that comes attached to that workspace very easily using that button. We also have this install requirements button at the bottom of the clone repository button. So that's in case that your repository comes with a requirements file. You don't need to open a terminal and type pip install requirements. You can just click that button and it will get the requirements installed for you. And so then I'm going to move into the folder, and I'm just going to follow the instructions of that specific notebook. In that case, well, we have the pip install set on a cell. Then I'm going to load all the libraries. And as I mentioned, this is an example of an AI agent. What it's doing is that it's passing the context of the California landscape metrics to one of the NRP hosted LLMs. And then we have this nice UI that you can use to interact with the agent. So I'm gonna select one of the default questions. What is find the maximum annual burn probability in San Diego County? And it will give me the answer based on the context that I previously passed to the model. And I have the same example right now running in the NRP Jupyter Hub. And I also passed some other questions like what is the average carbon turnover time in Los Angeles? Almost 20 years. Gave me the same answer for Orange County. And so after I finish working with my stuff, that at this point, because it's on this prep folder that I mentioned, all of this is exposed to any of my teammates of my group. So after I finish working, I can go to Hub Control Panel and stop my server. And we kindly ask you to do this every time that you stop working on your Jupyter Hub, because this is part of NRP. This is a shared resource. So we don't want idle pods to be running and with people not actively using them. Okay. And so this is an example of an agent AI classroom. You can find this over here. And there are other 3 examples. This one connects to a data set from the San Diego Gas and Electric Company. And this one connects to some TLS-derived metrics. The other example that we wanted to show you is Data 8. For those who are not familiar, Data 8, it's a Foundations of Data Science course offered by the University of California, Berkeley. It is a really, really good curriculum to teach students the foundations of programming, probability, statistics, hypothesis testing. It is a very, very well-built curriculum. And so here on NDP, we have made public the first 8 weeks of Data 8. For each of the weeks, you will find the instructions on which content is the student supposed to cover. For example, for the first week, they are supposed to read the first 2 chapters, cover the first 2 lectures, and deliver the lab 1 and homework 1. You will see the base repository for each week attached to the workspaces. There are not catalog assets in these workspaces because the data sets used in these course are curated toy data sets that are not like that relevant for research, so they are not worth part of the assets catalog. So we keep those on the base repositories, and here in the additional resources, you will find the links to each of the chapters. So again, if I'm a student and I'm working on Data 8, I can review the content of each of the weeks. I will notice that there is a customized image that needs to be pasted on the resources reservation menu So AutoGrader and the relevant libraries are set on my server. And so when I move to Jupyter Lab, so in this example, I'm assuming that I'm a student, that I was enrolled to the course. So inside of my user persistent storage, I created a folder called Data 8 that will persist across my different sessions. I have all the weeks pre-downloaded into my user folder. So then I can go to each of the weeks. I will see the homework, the lab, the lectures that are part of it. I can open the notebook. As I mentioned, this image comes with AutoGrader, which is a tool that allows the professor to set grading tests on the notebook that can be either open so the student knows whether or not the question was right or wrong, or they can be hidden so only the professor can grade the assignment. So in this case, I'm reviewing the first homework. So I'm loading the default cells as the notebook requires me to. So I go to the first question, I read the question, then I need to pad the answers. The answer for A is 2, for B it's, what is the answer for B? Let's see, it's 5. And then for C, it will be 3. I will check, and it will tell me that I passed, that I answered correctly. If I change one of those variables and I declare them again, and I check, I will get that I got one result wrong. Okay? And so if you are interested as an educator to take this curriculum and use it for your use case to test it, this is now discoverable through the Education Hub Explore section. If you go to Classrooms, you will find both examples over here. And once you are granted educator credentials, you are able to add these to your hub and either use it as it is currently built, or you can also edit the current content and add more workspaces, add more content to each of these workspaces. Because the end goal of all of this section is to be able to create reproducible material, to be able to create curated curriculum that can be used across all of the our educators community. And so given this, we want to close this tutorial by inviting you to a workshop that we are planning to host between August 4th and 6th here at SDSC. And the idea is that we want to gather multiple educators in finding and developing curated content that can be used by the community, understand your user needs, understand your use cases, and see how we can make this curriculum accessible to the rest of the public. So that's the QR code to sign for interest. And with that said, I will allow for the last 2 minutes for any last minute question. I can show you after you finish it. Sorry, yeah.
Do you have a GitHub presentation?
We can share it with folks after this tutorial. We're gonna request for the emails of everyone, and we can share it with you.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.